Welcome everyone to today's webinar, and thanks for being here. Webinar today is on how to accelerate project timelines with model review and approval. My name is Josh Hawley. I've been in the industry for 16 years. I've worn a lot of hats. I've detailed, I've checked, project managed, I've been an instructor, I've worked for a fabricator, I've worked as a subcontract detailer. So pretty much any situation you guys are in, I've probably been there. With me today is Tracy. Sean?
Hello. I've been in the industry for over 33 years in the steel industry. I've been in construction for a lot longer than that. I started out in concrete and have moved over to steel and have been there since. And I've worked for a variety of fabricators, detailers, even erectors, and some engineers. And so I've got a pretty good perspective and knowledge of where the industry's at and how it's moving forward.
And that's awesome, man. We appreciate you being here today to lend your expertise on this subject. So here's some of the content we're going to cover today. What is model review and approval? What are the benefits? What are the legalities? What are the workflows? And then some factors for success. And we're going to kind of splice in between Sean and I. He's got a lot of real world experience doing this, and he's going to give us some of his expertise on this as we go. So let's start off with model review and approval. What is it? So here's the best definition I can come up for to explain what model-based approval is. Model-based approval is an engineering review approach in which the detailer's 3D model is reviewed for accuracy and conformance in lieu of the 2D documents that are generated from the model. If we think back about 20 years, drawing approval was all done on paper. Regardless of where you created your drawings from, reams of paper were sent back and forth to complete the approval process. As time has gone on, that process, for the most part, has moved into a digital space. So creating a submittal from whatever PDF space you use and submitting it that way. This approach has the engineer reviewing the model, which is the source of everything, or most everything, that the 2D drawings come from. This isn't a new concept. This has been up and coming for at least the last 10 years, and we aren't the only ones. This process is being adopted around the globe. If you do a quick internet search, you'll see similar documents to the one I have referenced here from Ireland and the UK, right? This isn't new. And that document that I have referenced here is a document that was put out by the AISC on the Model Review and Approval Guide. And it was authored in part by our very own James Schwartz. And so it's really great to have SDS2 having been part of this process. So why is it being so widely adopted? That's the question. And maybe we can talk through some of those benefits. So limiting errors. Just as the fabrication of pieces and the construction of a building are three-dimensional, so should the review of the approval documents be. The document in this case would be the model, right? And so if we look at the old or current method up there with the blue rectangles, it starts off on the left with the 3D design model that's created by the engineer. Then it slides over where the engineer creates their two-dimensional structural drawings. Those are obviously issued to the detailer. And from there, we create the 3D fabrication model. And then from the 3D fabrication model, we go ahead and create the 2D shop drawings and erection drawings. So anytime you translate from a 3D environment down to the 2D state, you introduce the opportunity for manual errors and for misinterpretations. And so by moving from the old method to the new, the 3D model can be used for all aspects of the project: detailing, review, approval, fabrication, erection, I mean, even ESTA modeling if you wanted to go so far. And if we take a look at that new method, we can kind of see how it's different. So the green rectangles, if we start in that upper left corner again, the 3D design model is created. From there, we have the arrow in between that and the 3D fabrication model, and that arrow goes both ways. So we can send information from their model to our model inside of SDS. And you can obviously send information back and forth. And then from there, you grow the legs on the left and the right. The engineer is going to go ahead and create their 2D design documents, which you'll still get. And you're still going to go ahead and create your 2D shop drawings. but we're just cutting out that middleman with regards to the approval process and reinventing the wheel. Because if they've already created the documents, and then you have to create the model off of it versus taking their model and directly importing it, we're saving a ton of steps and a ton of time. Some of the things that I have listed here are things that generally you can import in, grids, member sizes, elevations. The list kind of goes on. Those are just the most common ones. So along with that, once you import the model in, you can get a better understanding of what's going on. So let's look at this column on the right, for example. Over the course of the review, for each beam to column joint on this member, the reviewer is going to flip back and forth between 18 drawings, some multiple times. So if we look at that example, perhaps this set of members is going out in one sequence from ground to roof. All of these are going to be reviewed anyways. So if the reviewer is going through looking at the erection document and they look at it for second floor, third floor, and roof, they'll be reviewing the column at least 3 times. And not to mention all the rest of the beams that go in with it. And even if you broke this down on a per joint basis, instead of looking at that column comprehensively, each time you review one of those intersections and you have a beam framing in on all 4 sides, you're reviewing at least bare minimum 5 sheets of paper that you have to flip back and forth and compare information on. By reviewing the 3D model in lieu of the drawings, a holistic approach can be taken to where the entire member and its connections can be reviewed at the same time, thus making the piece marks irrelevant in the process. By navigating around each of the joints in the model, the reviewer can easily review each connection, including material, bolts, holes, welds, elevations, alignments, interferences, and then general conformance and secondary information. So again, if we even look at just the single joint where we have the 5 drawings, that doesn't take into account any kickers that might be in there, any pour stops or deck edge angles that might be in there, other sheets that you're going to have to add on to this list of 18 plus. So reviewing in the model provides a cleaner, more efficient, and accurate way to review the members for approval. A clearer review status. So during the review process, the reviewer not only can review things holistically, like we just said, but they can update the model with accurate statuses and dates in real time. Them, as well as the detailer, can see all of this in real time and plan accordingly the next steps in the process, whether that is to release for fabrication, if there's members that need revise and resubmit, if there's something on hold. And then how does this all affect, for example, your load planning, your trucking? If you've already got the sequences in the order you want them to be in, with the members that need to be delivered to the site first, whether it's a small laydown room or having to erect off the truck, or even just doing erector sequencing and them knowing in their erection plan how they're going to put this up, how does all of that affect what's going to be issued to the shop? So you get a better understanding of what's happening in your job earlier in the process. And you can sort things. You can sort them by status. You can sort by comments or both. There's tons of benefits to reviewing the building as entities or as systems rather than individual components. When we look at how all of these things tie together and interface together at the same time instead of just one at a time, it enables more access for the project for each of the stakeholders, thus creating an increased efficiency and fast tracking across the board. And again, that's your detailers, your engineers, your architects, your GC, everybody.
Josh, there's one thing that people might want to take into consideration when they're putting everybody together. As a detailer, when it comes to the structural steel model, when you come with statusing and other things like that, the detailer needs to try to remember that they need to share their status with the other entities so that everybody is on the same page with what sequence it's on or which members are being reviewed. And you can set those statuses within the status display. You can also create a list for them of members that are going to be reviewed within the model so that they can bring up that list and be able to hide all the other members that they don't need to be reviewing or looking at. And so they're only looking and concentrating on the members that are specific to what needs to be reviewed at that time.
And those are great points, Sean. And you may get to this a little bit later in the presentation, but are you setting up those statuses prior to sending out your model to the reviewer?
Yes, we go through, and if there's multiple sequences, we will go through and set up those statuses so that the modeler and the detailer themselves can use those to help navigate as they're creating the model or working on something on the side, whether it be for some parts or something like that. Then they have that also.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for that, Sean. I appreciate you interjecting right there. So the metadata. So obviously, right, the big things that we're focusing on are beams, columns, bracing, you know, the big stuff, and the connections, but there's plenty of pieces of secondary information or metadata in the detailing process that need to be passed down the line from detailing to the shop to fabrication for review. One of these things is, for example, is your finishes. So typically things like galvanizing are listed as a note on the detail sheet. And at times those notes get missed. If the reviewer is looking for the information during the review and it's not there, that's a problem. So with a 3D model, they can go ahead and simply filter, just like Sean was saying with some statuses. They can filter to see all the members that are galvanized in the model and review it at a glance. If there's some that needs to be galvanized, if it's not, they can go ahead and note that in the model on the fly, and then pass those notes directly back to the detailer in the model so that all of the information is kept in one place. And then there's even other areas, right? So material grade, sequence buyout, on-hold members. Perhaps you have a set of conditions that require A57250 plate, whereas the typical spec and the model setup is A36 because that's your common plate grade. This is actually a specific example that I had in a job I detailed in the past. And the reviewer is able to go in and set those statuses like Sean was talking about to show us all of the A572 grade 50 plate in the model. And then if something's been missed, they can flag that instead of having to go sheet by sheet and BOM by BOM to go ahead and find it. So I have a few listed here, but there's so much metadata inside the model, and we can leverage all of that to increase the efficiency of the review. The legalities. So I think the easiest way to cover this topic is to reference exactly what the AISC states about it. So I've gone ahead and copied their verbiage from the document that I listed earlier in our presentation. But there's one thing I really wanted to point out right here, and it's highlighted in yellow. The code does not establish a preference between 2D drawings and 3D models as approval documents. Either is acceptable as long as all parties agree. So the long and short of that is it is legal, right? Obviously, you need to be talking on the front end to your other partners inside the project. You need to take a look internally at your own company's policies to see if this would align, or make changes to your policies within your company to make them align to this. But from an AISC standpoint, this is legal. I would encourage you to research and read the document that I had linked earlier in the presentation. A simple search on the internet, AISC model-based approvals, that document will pop up. I would also encourage you to go through and read the parts of the Code of Standard Practice that reference this on your own, just to make sure you're informed. Do your due diligence, but again, it's legal and it's happening every day across the country.
Josh, at the NASCC that I went to this last year,
Yeah.
They talked a lot about this and the way it's moving forward with the legalities of the model compared to 2D drawings, and they were saying that a lot of the specifications are going to soon be coming out where they specify in the specifications what type of model to be using, how you'll be BIM coordinating, and the legalities of that, and what you're allowed to share and what you're not allowed to share. And so the industry itself is moving forward towards a model-based procedure for all of the steel industry. And so I think as we go on these next few years, you'll see more and more of this popping up, and the talk is definitely getting a lot more expansive on what they're going to cover and how it's going to be situated with each project. And so finding that out from your general contractor up front will help you to be able to know what you need to be providing if they don't specify it in the specifications.
That's really interesting, Sean. So are you saying that the AISC is actually putting resources to developing those standards for the specifications on 3D submittals?
Yes, they are. They want to be able to tie in the engineers, the detailer, and the fabricator all within the model. And then the talk is once they get that together, then they can be able to provide the erector with a model that basically, he can use right there on site. But they want to make sure that all three, the fabricator, the detailer, and the engineer, all have that information and the legalities kind of situated out on what they need to be providing.
That's pretty awesome. I did not know that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
Workflows. So starting with communication, incorporate early. And Sean can speak to this, I'm sure. The time to start this process is before the project starts, not during. The engineer needs to know if something needs to be done differently, right? They have their own way of modeling, but if what they're doing won't translate over to what you need when you import the model, then it's kind of pointless. So we need to make sure that we're talking to the engineers early, before the modeling process starts or the early part of their process to ensure they're doing what we need. Anything to add to that, Sean?
Our company, we go ahead and we add in the bidding process. We ask the information about the model, what model we can receive, what model we can use, and how we can use their model to be able to create our model. And then we also ask the requirements in the bidding process of what is required from us or what we are going to provide. Because sometimes they will want to take advantage of the detailer and their time and resources and have you be working a lot with the model, BIM, engineer, and a lot of those meetings. And if you don't have that covered up front, then you'll end up wasting a lot of time or money on your situation with the detailer providing that service and not getting paid for it. So make sure you're clear on your bids, what is required for you, and also what is required from the GC, getting that model from them also.
Gotcha. Perfect. Moving on, comments and statuses. So there's going to be some training involved, right? The reviewer is probably not familiar with SDS2. They probably don't know kind of how some of that functionality we were talking about a little bit earlier works with setting statuses and things like that. So again, by starting early, you can move through those hurdles pretty easily. And Sean, if you have anything to add to any of these points as I'm going, you feel free to chime in.
Yeah, when it comes to releasing your model to an engineer, talk to the engineer, ask them what they do know and what they don't know. Sometimes they have another software that will take in the model and bring in the status information, and then they can go ahead and review, and they have their own software to take care of that. But some of them don't. They don't have the review station, and so knowing up front what you need to provide with the engineer and what they do know can help you out also. It might help a lot of the detailers if they go ahead and either create like a little training PDF of their own, and this is what we use, this is how we use it, and this is how you can use our information to move forward with your review, and then kind of lay that out for them so they have that. That's one way of doing it. Another way, I've gone online with the engineer and spent about a good half hour just going over some of the simple processes, where the buttons are, how to move and navigate through SDS2 Reviewer and how to put in their comments. They picked it up pretty easily, and it's a fairly easy, simple program to use, so they didn't have a problem with it. But having that established up front will help you out in making this flow go a little bit easier.
Well, and I imagine too, the more that this gains in popularity, and the more it's being used, it's just like anything else. The more it's being used, the faster you get at it, meaning the engineers learning the software and speeding up their review process. And so, doing our part by working with them at the beginning stages, it's just going to help expedite this process into the industry even faster.
Correct.
Protocols. So what does this process look like? And here's a few questions that may help dial that in. Who's responsible for each of these different steps? Who's responsible for supplying the software? Where will the archives be stored, etc.? Just getting a clear direction early on in the process so you have the information to make decisions on should you need to change your processes going forward. So that kind of leads us to submittals. And all the steps we just spoke about lead us to that point, and having an action plan in place, knowing where everything goes, who's supposed to be doing it. All of this will make your submittal processes way more successful. And I want to take a look at that diagram on the right-hand side. This was pulled from that AISC document that I referenced earlier. And it kind of steps through what that process looks like. So pre-construction coordination meetings, starting early, establishing your standards, location of comments, again, who's supplying the software, and so on. From there, you create your fab model. From there, you make your initial submittal. And you can see as it jets off to the right there, create an archive. So I'm assuming you're creating an archive, and then the reviewer is creating an archive for what they received. And then they're reviewing the submittal, and then they're creating an archive. So we're creating that paper trail, so to speak, without paper. If you're exporting IFCs, if you're going ahead and packing the job and saving off the .jft file, whatever that looks like, however your process is that you want to do it, we're establishing a document record of the entire life cycle of that project. Again, stepping down, set submittal actions, and then they're going to send it back to you. They're going to create an archive. You're going to create an archive. Everybody has their paper trail. And then you can see that arrow on the left that kind of juts over and back up and around. If something's added in the process in that model review and it's never been reviewed, if something's on hold, if there's revise and resubmit items, all those things are going to go back up and spin through the same process that we just went through. The stuff that doesn't, it's going to get approved. And then obviously on to fabrication. So not overly different in a way than what we're currently doing with two-dimensional paper or the digital 2D drawings, just a little bit different process. Anything you want to add to that, Sean?
No, you covered it. You do want to create those archives because if anything happens to your model or something goes wrong, you have that backup there, which is always a good case. And each submittal you make, you do want to create an archive of each submittal, specifying what it is, the date, and things like that, so that legality-wise, if there's anything that comes up, you have a copy and the date that it was created.
Awesome. So I think next we're going to jump into some member property stuff, and I'm going to kick this over to you, Sean, to go ahead and go through it.
Thank you, Josh. Yes, I will go ahead and explain some of the items that we are going to take care of inside of the member detail itself. And most of these items you'll find with the approval process, you'll find in the general custom properties. Most detailers, as they're working through and trying to figure out if everything's going to work right, and in this situation I have here, the loads weren't working correctly. And so the detailer went in, he specified, you can either use left end or right end, and then he specified his user comments and added those in there. In this little section here, we can go ahead and specify all of the information that we need to express to the engineer and let him know where we're having any difficulties, problems, or if we just need them to verify something. As you can tell, there's a couple of check boxes you can go through. And if you just need a verify grade or a connection, the connection material, something you changed, then you can go ahead and specify it there and then go ahead and add your user comments and let them know, hey, I changed the grade on this material here to make the connection work a little bit better. And then they can evaluate, run through. They may agree with that, or they may ask you for your version of what SDS2 came up with the calcs on that to get the information. Some of them will just go ahead and let you know what they did to change it, and then you'll go ahead and change it. But within each of these members, you can go ahead and select all this information, keep track of it, and then if you need to, you can actually put dates on there of when you made the comments, so that if the engineer needs to see that information, he can. Like, we had a discussion with an engineer, talked about a connection. I came in here and I specified that we changed the bolting on it, the bolt spacing, based upon a conversation on this date. So we kept record of when we discussed this change, and we specified it in here so that everybody knew where it was, why the change happened and what was happening at that time, when we talked and everything else. So it's a good way of keeping track of that. You can also, if you look above, you have notes up there. You can go ahead and keep notes in there too, and just specify to the engineer that, hey, I kept notes on what we talked about inside of that notes. So when it comes to several members, it might be a little tedious trying to fill that out for each one. So in the notes, you can go ahead and specify for this group here, and then you can specify the group that you had either saved as a selection if you need to, and then let them know that in this group, these are the ones that we've changed. When the engineer gets it, he's going to go ahead and review. Hopefully you've either taught him or he knows and understands how to respond and give his information. But he'll go through, look at each one that you've specified or highlighted. I go through and I actually highlight the ones that I have questions on with a different color for them. And if it's a right end, left end, then I'll give them that color for the end connection. And so they can use my status selection that I've made for them, upload it, select it, choose the ones that they need, and then they'll see the ones that need to be reviewed. They can come into here, take a look at the information that I posted. If I need them to go to the notes, I'll tell them to go to the notes because I've got more information in there. One thing that helps out is letting them know that list and having within the model a list of the items that, or the members that have been affected by whatever is not working right. And so they can see that, and it helps speed it up for them a little bit faster too. They will go through and do a general review of what they see connection wise to make sure that the majority of them look like they're following what they have provided, or it follows the uniform load for each of them, and just make sure that it's all looking good. But then within here, they can go in, they can look at what they have comment wise and specify, okay, this is what we did. We want you to do this. They can give you direction. They can tell you what needs to change, what needs to be modified. If it's the left end connection, right end connection, they also can go in and provide notes. And then in the notes, they can put their notes in there, and then they can just put their initials at the end with a date. And then they can have that as a record also. So it's a very good way of keeping track of all this information per member if needs be. And so it's very beneficial and helpful for the GC or for later on down the road when, hey, how come we change this? Well, you go in, you look at the member, you edit it. I've got notes here saying that the engineer wanted to update it per this. So it's a good way of keeping track of that and helping it out with keeping all that documentation in one area instead of scattered all over the place and with 100 different folders here and there. It helps reduce that. So once you get this information back from the engineer, you can go through, make the modifications, get everything updated, and have that model basically up to where they need. Now, sometimes there are some engineers, they want you to send the model back, kind of like a revise and resubmit, but they just want to see that you've updated the information. So they may say approved as noted, and you can proceed, but then just give them a copy of the updated information so that they have it on record. And I've had some do that. I've had some, hey, approved as noted, just as long as you make it, keep going and move forward. So from there, we went right into fabrication. One thing I will note, there are some engineers that like to review the detail. And so we would let them know, we'll go ahead and detail it, but we're just going to hit the SDS2 detail on submaterial and material so that when they edit the material and they go look at and view the detail, they can click on that and see it. They just want to see the overall properties, make sure that it kind of looks good that way. And so there's been a few where I've had that request, and so we've gone ahead and done that. We didn't clean up anything because we told them that we're not going to waste that time, but we gave them the model with those, and it helped them move along through the process. It gave them that comfort of being able to see the kind of the 2D. And so the transition of that will probably take place on a few of these engineers as you go through. But once you get that, you have that information, you can go through and start correcting everything, getting it updated. And one thing I do want to give you as a note to help you out with making sure that things don't get lost or changed is to make sure that you do not go in and update any of their notes that they have made. If you need to make an additional note or something like that, you can still use the user comments, or you can go into notes, add your notes in with the date and any information that you need to update. When I do the R&Rs that they just want to see it, I will go into the notes and make my note information there of any comments that I had. And then they can review that and keep track of those notes also. So just be careful of that. And as we discussed previously, always make sure you archive and have a copy of it with the date. And that one you can just put in the folder, leave it there. Don't edit it, leave it, and just have it there as a safe keep. But it's a nice process to help move things along. If you have a couple questions, you can get on with the engineer pretty quickly, review the model. He has it, you have it, you're on the same page. You can get that question answered right away, move on, and then you can make your notes, document you made the phone call, put the date down, and keep that in there. You'll be able to then speed up your processes for all of that, what you need to do. So from there, you can go ahead and start your fabrication. The fabricator might want a quick ABM or one of the current ABMs, and so you can give them that updated ABM. You can then go ahead and proceed with giving them the model if they need it. Some use that as their preliminary for purchasing, but from there you can go ahead and create the 2D drawing. They can download the CNC from the model if you give them that right away, and they can get ready and start moving forward so that when you have the 2D drawings done, then they can go ahead and incorporate any welds or holds or then do their QC from there. But it's a nice, smooth process, and I see the industry moving that way, and I think it'll be very beneficial for everybody to move this way to help facilitate faster processes, but then it also helps the detailer, and I'd mentioned this before, helps you get paid a little faster too. You don't have to wait weeks or months for the BFAs to come back and then go ahead and then make your IFCs and then have to wait another 2 to 3 weeks to detail everything out and get it going. You can have the approval process done in less than a week, start your IFCs, get those out, and then 2 weeks later, you're getting paid for the whole project. You can now get another project in. And so it's very beneficial that way. Josh, do you have any other comments you'd like to add?
No, Sean, I think you covered that really, really well. And especially that part about getting paid a little faster, right? I mean, it speaks to everything we've talked about. This is going to expedite the process for everyone. So no, good job. Let's go ahead and jump into factors for success. So this is not the norm. This isn't business as usual. This is a new process and a new way of thinking. And yeah, it's going to be different and there's going to be a learning curve, right? But embrace the excitement of change and the possibilities. You're going to see it pay dividends in time savings, review accuracy. I've heard of many cases where they're seeing upwards of anywhere from 20 to 50% speed up time in return submittals. So, and obviously, you've heard the things I've told you, what Sean's told you, and the proof's in the pudding. You're going to see time savings with this process. Find the right people. Find people who are excited about the technology and where the industry's going. Planning and communication is key. This goes all the way back to the beginning with building your team. How will you handle on-hold items, schedule changes, who's in charge of what different aspects? The issues are all still the same, but the process for handling them is different. So create a plan and set expectations and expect success, right? So a farmer doesn't plant a seed and not expect to reap a harvest. This is the same thing. Put this process together and expect success and you will get it. Adapt and overcome. So check in often and then adapt to that situation. If your process isn't going the way that you want it to, or if it needs a tweak for whatever reason, don't be afraid to change the process if it can be better, right? If it ain't broke, break it. Sometimes that's what we got to do to make it better. Always be learning. Train some more. This is a new process and it's going to be constantly evolving, especially with that information that Sean gave us a little bit ago about the AISC and what they're doing to foster and spearhead this process along. So keep training your people. Stay up to date on the changes in the industry and in the softwares that you use, not just within SDS2, but the other softwares that your partners are using. And just communicate that to your team constantly. And then solidify your resources, right? If it's not ready to go from the beginning, you're already set up to fail. So make sure you have the basics covered. Make sure you have the right computers, the right internet capabilities. Things like that are going to go a long way in your success.
Going on the resources, I would mention also that a lot of engineers do like the cloud-based, and so if you have a cloud-based server and you have an available license for them, that could also help out a lot also. Then they can just log in, use your license on the cloud, and then they can go through, review stuff. Once they're done, the only worry they had was, how do I make sure I have a copy? I've explained to them and showed them how you can just go ahead and export it onto the dashboard or the desktop, and then from there you can go ahead and copy it down to your machine. And so it's a very simple process and is easy for them to do, and it also helps out, a couple days here and there if they're like, we could get to it faster, but we just don't have the resources to review it right now.
Absolutely, and I understand what you're saying. Making sure you have a license available for them, because if all their licenses are tied up, your stuff's not getting reviewed. That's a great tip, man.
Exactly.
And with that, we'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and type in your questions. So while we're waiting on some more questions to get into the chat, maybe we can go ahead and launch one of our polls here. What is your standard process for approval review? And while you guys go ahead and fill that out, I'm going to field a couple of the questions that we've got here so far. One of the questions, but if we as detailers use a shared model from an engineer, we're supposed to just trust materials located correctly. Who is liable for the mistakes at that point? because the detailer would at least need to check that model to relieve them from errors and so on. Basically, people aren't, the fabric's not worried about the process, they just want to correct. Any detailer worth their salt's going to review the model. And nobody's saying that you shouldn't. It's no different even now than when we get models in for estimating, or even at the beginning of the detailing process. Even if you're not doing an approval or a model-based approval, you're still turning out 2D shops in a PDF form. As detailers, you should still be reviewing the model for accuracy. All this is doing is trying to help expedite that process. So if we can import in 500 members versus put them in, we should be able to save time while reviewing the model versus the standard input process of dumping steel into the model. And with that, maybe we can review the results of the first poll. So it looks like 76% are doing a PDF submittal and 23% are doing PDF and the model submittal. So that's great. That, kind of stepping into that process where we're just going from the 2D state into introducing both of them. And that's going to be kind of how we transition into this next form of model-based approvals. Another question: how does the fabricator ultimately know what makes it onto the 2D shop detail drawing is in line with the model, which is reviewed and approved? Seems like fabricator risk is involved, not knowing exactly what's on the drawings. Hey, Sean, did you want to try and field that one maybe from your experience?
Yeah, in this case, your model's going to be the main source of all correct. Everything's on there. We've got all the welds, everything else. There are some times where you can't get welds in the model, and so you'll have to add it 2D. But you're still, everything, once it's been approved and everything's good with the model and it's accurate, it fits within the BIM check, because a lot of the times the GC, at the same time as it's being approved by the engineer, the GC is putting it in the BIM to see if there's any clashes with any of the piping or electrical, or do we need to move something because we actually have it in the wrong place. So the BIM review is being done at the same time. And so when you get your model back, you can then go ahead and start cleaning up. And that's when I usually start the cleaning up. I don't do it prior, because that model that I start cleaning up is not the accurate model that's being reviewed by the engineer. And so you might have a little delay there, but it's only a few days, depending on how long it takes them. But at least most times it's been less than a week. And so they can go ahead and get that back to you, and then you start cleaning from there. And then everything is accurate based off of the engineer reviews, all of his comments in there. If you do an XML export, all the status information and everything's in there too, if you've statused it.
And I actually have another follow-up question that might tie right into that, Sean. How is the design team actually reviewing the approved model? Are they just looking for conceptual locations, etc., or are they actually measuring grid lines, distance between beams, work point locations of bracing, etc.? Maybe you can speak to some of the best practice stuff that you've gone through with designers when you started this process with them.
So the engineer will get the actual JFT model. We'll give him that model to review, to make the comments and everything. But at the same time, we send out an IFC model for the BIM, for the general contractor or the architect, so that the BIM reviewer can then import it in and then go over everything, and then they're checking for compliance with other trades to see if our steel is right where it needs to be. And most times the BIM, in the BIM review, they actually pull out or hide the structural steel that was by design put there, and then you'll see all of our steel in place.
Gotcha. I think that helps speaks to that process a little bit. I have a question for you directly. So what are some of the objections you've heard from designers, right, on starting this process, and how have you overcome that?
Some of the difficulties I've had is they want you to update the model right there and then turn around in a day. And I always tell them it takes 3 to 4 days, and they get a little upset about that. They
Okay.
still don't have that understanding of what time it takes to actually update models depending on the severity of the changes they're asking for. And so the problem I have is the GCs not having a good understanding of that modeling process. And I'm hoping in time that will change. But other than that, usually with the design teams, they have a pretty good understanding because they themselves, are modeling and using models themselves.
Oh, gotcha. A follow-up question to one you answered just a minute ago. Are you 100% model review only on every project and every customer? I know you and I've kind of talked about this. It's taken some time, right? Because obviously you don't work with the same designers all the time. So can you speak to that 100% thing and kind of what your ratios look like?
I only know of a few engineers that like to do the 100% model review. And so there's not a lot of them out there. And so you will have to ask and find out what engineers know what. And like I said in the seminar, you need to ask the engineer up front what they can and what they can't do, and are they willing to be trained? And if so, then you can go that process. And it does help out, but you do have to let everybody in the line. If it's not specified in the project up front, let them know, hey, we want to do model review, we want to do this is how it's done. It'll save time. Usually if it's going to end up saving them a few weeks, they're up for that. And so that right now it's depending on what is yes or what's a no on which of the design teams will allow that.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of these questions are kind of tying together here. So one of our participants said, my experience is that architectural and structural models are close enough, within eighth and quarter, whatever. Therefore, my model is much more accurate than theirs. So hiding their model in the BIM and showing mine would show discrepancies. Seems like there is too much ambiguity. You following where we're going with that question?
Yeah, their model, when it goes to, like I said, when it comes to BIM, they hide either the architect's structural portion of it, or they hide the engineer structural portion of it, and they use ours because it's accurate, just like you said. Ours are accurate, and so they hide it. The design teams, and they use our model, for the BIM review and everything to verify where everything's at, because ultimately that's where it's going to go, is what we have modeled. And so they do trust that, and a lot of them have used it to actually push some of the other trades. Hey, this is where it's at. They share it with them, then they can go ahead and in their Revit model, they can import that in and then start putting all their piping around our steel, and then we don't have to worry about any more clashes or conflicts.
So is it pretty safe to say then that you're getting repeat customers from this?
I would say yes, and also there's, like I said, it's still new, so they're a little hesitant to keep going with it. But though some of the larger companies see the benefit, they see how it makes production go faster. They see how it's beneficial for everybody in all trades to be using the model review, not just by the engineer, but also with the BIM to get a more accurate account of the building overall. And so I do see it moving that way.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like we had a lot of questions right there that just kind of tied together. I think it's good dialogue. I want to go ahead and see if we can launch poll number 2. So have you ever been involved in a model-based approval process? Obviously, Sean, you could check yes on this one.
Yep.
And while we're doing that, let's see if you have any other questions here. So this question, I'm going to try and paraphrase this one. I think it has to do with model sharing, basically, right? So if you have the model and you ask a question regarding a certain beam and the model is submitted to the engineer, how do you reincorporate that comment? And I think this may speak to, you know, one of two processes, right? Like number one, you're either sending your model and then staying out of it for a couple of days while they're doing that process, or you're doing the model sharing where maybe you're on the cloud and they're logging into your system. Can you talk about that, Sean, and maybe give some clarification on what that process looks like and how to keep model integrity?
Yeah, both situations are correct. If you send the model to them, then you're going to stay out of it. And staying out of it, you know, you think, well, I'm losing some downtime, but you know, if you work on the model for another few more days and then you don't get your PDFs back in 3 to 4 weeks, then you know you've got a lot of downtime anyhow. But if you can send the model, stay out of it for a few days, and then if there's anything you need to adjust, you just be aware of when you're talking with the engineer. If you guys do a phone conversation, then you just keep track of that, and then when the model comes back, then you go ahead and make all your updates. But if you're doing cloud-based and the model's up there and they can see it and review there, you know, obviously they're not going to change any of the integrity of the model because it's a review station, but you can go in and you can actually update and they can see it live, update, and you can go over everything. And I've had one situation where I had the engineer on the phone and we went over everything and I showed him the properties, went into the load information and told him, well, look here, it was because the weld was too weak or something like that, you know, and showed him the example and he saw where that was at, and then he was able to make an adjustment and a decision right there. And the model's already updated, so we're good to go. Is all he does is just keep record of what was done, and we go from there, and it saves a lot of time.
Awesome. I think that brings some clarity to that. You know, and I've had some experience too where yeah, you know, you send out the model and you stay out of it for a few days, and you're right. It does feel like you're losing time, but you're really not, because of the amount of time you're seeing in return approvals, the expedited process. It really kind of reverses that thought process on the losing time. We'll go ahead and take a look at the results from poll number 2. Looks like 61% of you have not been involved in a model-based approval process, and 39 have, which is good. I'm glad there's a lot of exposure out there. You know, 40%, that's pretty great. I had another question for you, and you know, we've had a lot of dialogue here, Sean, but maybe you touched on this. I know you spoke about it in our presentation, how the AISC is getting involved and they're starting to put things out in the spec and stuff like that. What are you seeing in the specs currently without them having put out their new information to help people dive into this process? And while we're doing that, we'll go ahead and we're running poll number 3. What's your job role? So while people are filling that out, Sean, if you go ahead and speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
Now, I know when we were there at the conference, the NISD was also talking about this too, and they were talking about how the specification, there's only one, and I can't remember the name of the specification she mentioned, but there's only one specification type that they've seen where they actually specified the model and the information, and they are in discussions with AISC, and I talked to both. There was a NISD and a AIC board members there that when I was talking to them, they're like, yeah, we want to start moving this forward, but it's getting mainly the architects on board with understanding this process and then having it be a standard, because most of your specifications are coming from the architect. And so they want to push forward on it, but I don't know the process on how long it's going to take them to get things moving forward, or or if it's going to be something that we see within the next year or 5 years, I'm not sure, but I do know that they have it in sight. They're aware of it. They want to get moving forward with it. And if the engineer or the architect specify on the drawing, then that also works as the same thing as putting it in the specs itself.
Gotcha. But one more question before we do that. I want to go ahead and take a look at the results of that poll. Looks like predominantly on here today we got detailers, so that's great. That's great that you guys are here to just get some more information from other people in the industry who are doing it. About 10% are engineers, 2% are fabricators. Another question. So when we were talking about that model approach to model review and how you can have it on the cloud basically, and the engineers can use a review station inside your cloud. The question is, you said that when reviewing a cloud-based model, the engineer can see your changes live. Do they see the changes you make them, or do they need to do some sort of refresh operation to see what you've changed during the discussion with them? I imagine if you're on the cloud, that's going to be a live operation, correct, Sean?
Yeah, it will be live, and I haven't quite tested to see what the delay is on if SS2 refreshes on its own, and that's something I'd actually like to try out. So I might try that today and see, have somebody change something live on it while I'm in the review and see what the lag is and how long it took. But I just know that he was able to see it and we discussed it, and so things worked out okay that way.
Awesome. I'm going to take one more question and then we'll wrap it up. This person asked, do you ever see in the essence of the fast track design team partnering with a detailing firm to create an accurate 100% complete and checked model and allow for the fabricator access to that model to detail to their shop standards? I've never heard of that necessarily. I figure when detailing is subcontracted, that's model and drawings and all, but maybe you have a different perspective than I do.
I haven't seen, where they have, like if I'm understanding right, they basically want the model, everything done with the model up front, and then you go ahead and turn around and have the detailer or the fabricator take over at that point and get everything done to the shop standard. If I'm understanding right, it seems like
that's how I'm understanding it too.
Yeah, because it now when you say in fast track, I mean I don't think everything these days is considered fast tracked, even though they don't. Back in the day, a fast track job meant something different than a normal job. But I think these days fast tracked is every project you're on, and so there's no separation. They do want it faster, sooner, better, and 100% accurate. And so, yes, in the process, we always make sure that we do a model check before releasing the model, and that has to be done for, accuracy and everything at that point. And then the engineer will give his comments, and if there's anything we missed, then he'll pick that up. If not, we do one more final check after we've made the updates from the engineer's comments, and then we can go ahead and, like, the erection drawings can be worked on while we're doing that final model check, and then go ahead and proceed with all the details in the shop details after that.
Excellent. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up. Sean, I want to thank you for coming on and lending your expertise to this, and thank everybody else for coming on today. If you have any other questions, as always, feel free to follow up with us via email or go ahead and give us a call, and we're glad to help you out any way we can. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.